So we ready to explore one of the most iconic rivalries in the early days of bodybuilding? Let's go ahead and talk about it. Guys, welcome to another episode of Fitness After Dark with your host as always, Nice Via Vicencio. And you guys already know the drill. Every episode, we have to hand it off to Mr. Bruce Buffer. And gentlemen, we are live. Man, I always love doing that. So a common area that doesn't get talked about too much on YouTube when it comes to bodybuilding, I would say arguably is the Silver Age. The Silver Age is basically the time period between, I would say 1948, all the way, I'd say around 1965, 66, when Arnold started winning in the late 60s. That period of time is defined by the Silver Age bodybuilders. Most notably, it's Vince Gironda. He is the GOAT. He is the pioneer when it comes to that time period. However, there's two icons that I really want to explore in this episode of Fitness After Dark and the rivalry that kind of defined that time period overall, since it is the unexplored, the dark, the wild side of the fitness industry that we talk about on Fitness After Dark. To kick things off, Steve Reeves, little backstory. Steve Reeves is known as Hercules. He portrayed Hercules in the 1950s around that time period in Hollywood. Reg Park, he later became known as Arnold Schwarzenegger's one of his biggest mentors to his life, and arguably is one of the most influential towards his success in bodybuilding, especially towards the late 1960s. So those two, think about it, if those two come to a head and compete against each other, that's honestly one hell of a showdown. So the two decided to go at it and compete against one another in the 1950 Miss Universe. Leading up to that event, Steve Reeves had almost an impeccable record, and Reg Park up at that point was trying to prove his name. It's an iconic but classic showdown, USA versus England. The USA was represented by Steve Reeves, England was being represented by Reg Park, and the two just had a showdown that defined the Silver Age of bodybuilding and later on became known as one of the most iconic rivalries in the early days of bodybuilding. The two went ahead at the 1950 Mr. Universe in a showdown that was decided by a very, very close razor decision. Turns out that Steve Reeves ended up taking the W on that night. So due to the uncertainty of how he competed at that year's Mr. Universe, he decided to go ahead and forego his bodybuilding career for the rest of that time and went ahead and went all in on his Hollywood career and became known as the icon that portrayed Hercules in the early days of the character and during that time period in Hollywood. So Reg Park went ahead and stayed competing after that 1950s Mr. Universe and went ahead and became known as Arnold Schwarzenegger's most influential mentor at that time. So why is this rivalry one of the most iconic? The two had some of the most impressive physiques at that time period, and the fact that the decision of who was going to take home that year's Mr. Universe was decided this closely made that rivalry very iconic, with many to this day still debating who had the better physique overall and who actually won that year's Mr. Universe. It's one of those rivalries that don't get talked about too much, but are very influential with the history of bodybuilding overall. So that was this week's episode of Fitness After Dark. I appreciate you guys, as always, tuning in for this short little podcast. If you guys watched that Thanksgiving special, appreciate y'all too. I made that with a lot of love, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that as well. And if you guys want more old school bodybuilding content, don't leave. Check out these two videos right here for you guys so you guys can go ahead and find out more. I appreciate y'all as always. Have an awesome rest of the week and have a badass workout.